man, let's get up and shock out. See, cause almighty are there.
Okay. Some notes I need to keep in mind. Get us started. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, good morning and thank you for joining us again today. Hope you all had a restful night and are feeling energized for another day of inspiration, knowledge sharing, and collaboration. Can I please get a round of applause to kickstart this exciting day? Thank you. Now, let's dive into our agenda and explore the captivating discussions awaiting us. Our morning will commence with a thought provoking keynote speech by an extraordinary individual. I'm thrilled to announce Irena Zubcevic, Chief of Intergovernmental Policy and Review Branch at the United Nations. Irena will enlighten us on the crucial topic of pathways to key drivers of reducing climate change. Her insights will undoubtedly ignite our imaginations and empower us to take meaningful action. She's going to be joining us virtually. Irena, please take the stage.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the organizers for the invitation to speak again at this important summit that will, in the course of the 2 days, discuss how we can tackle together the most important issues related to sustainability. But before I start, just a small correction. I used to be at the United Nations. Now I'm a director of the Stakeholder Forum for a Sustainable Future, as you can see on my background. So last year, in my speech, as I was talking about environmental, social, and governance, ESG, and how they are essential for shaping our sustainable future, I underlined that sustainability is a long-term goal that requires a change of mindsets. It requires transformative actions for our economy, society, and environment. For decades, there has always been a group of visionaries and scientifically minded persons who have been beyond the current moment, who have seen beyond the current moment and recognized the importance of sustainability. But the state in which our world finds itself today requires more than just a group of visionaries. It requires everyone to embrace sustainability, starting from our individual lifestyles to governments and multinationals and everyone in between. In this regard, this year, I will focus on a particular topic of key drivers for reducing climate change, as climate change is one of the most prominent impediments to sustainability caused by anthropogenic activities. But it is not only an environmental issue, but as we all know, it is also economic when infrastructure is destroyed, jobs lost, and supply chains disrupted, as well as social when impacts of climate change disrupt societies through forced displacement and loss of livelihoods. Scientists are telling us that we need to hold the rise of the global mean temperature below 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial times as a threshold after which climate change impacts become very serious. And so it goes back to changing how we produce and consume. Business can play a key role in leading these transformations by creating sustainable, inclusive, and innovative solutions. There is numerous research telling us about impacts of climate change. Latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a preeminent body for informing policymakers on impacts and consequences of climate change, tell us that global greenhouse gas, GHG emissions, have continued to increase, arising from unsustainable energy and land use change, lifestyles and patterns of consumption and production across regions, between and within countries and among individuals, and come mostly from the sectors of energy, industry, transport, buildings, agriculture, forestry, and other land use. Approximately 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. 3.3 to 3.6 billion people, it's a lot of people, right? Increasing weather and climate extreme events have exposed millions of people to acute food and water insecurity. Economic damages from climate change have been detected in most climate-exposed sectors, such as agriculture, forestry, fishery, energy, and tourism. Individual livelihoods have been affected through, for example, destructions of homes and infrastructure, and loss of property and income, human health and food security, with adverse effects on gender and social equity. In urban areas, infrastructure, including transportation, water, sanitation, and energy systems, have been compromised by extreme weather events, resulting in economic losses, disruptions of services, and negative impacts to well-being. The worst adverse impacts are concentrated amongst economically and socially marginalized urban residents. So the question is, what needs to be done? A big step is that we are all aware of the consequences of climate change. Scientists and researchers are being helped by many activists who exert pressure on politicians and businesses to change their ways. Your summit is also one of them. Mitigation by reducing emissions and stabilizing the levels of heat-trapping greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and adapting to climate change are the only way forward if we want to avoid the course of destruction. And we have moral obligation towards present and future generations. It has been repeated many times that we are the last generation that can do something meaningful about it and avoid catastrophe. There are several pathways to key drivers that can help reduce climate change, but it needs to be done by all governments, businesses, and individuals. Here are some of the important ones. Renewable energy and energy efficiency. Transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, and hydropower can greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions as they are the biggest emitters of GHG. Continued investment in research and development can lead to technological breakthroughs and cost reductions in renewable energy. Governments can provide supportive policies such as feed-in tariffs and tax incentives to encourage investment in renewable energy. Feed-in tariffs can be especially important for businesses, as with right incentive, they can provide a stable and favorable investment environment for the renewable energy industry, which then in turn can help drive down the cost of renewable energy technologies and reduce GHG emissions. They can also encourage greater participation in renewable energy production by households, businesses, and communities, which can lead to greater energy independence and security, as has been proven in countries that have these incentives in place, like Australia or Germany. Research shows that putting a price on carbon-based fuels, so-called carbon tax, can be an effective way of reducing GHG emissions and pollution levels across the globe, as taxing fossil fuels provides an incentive for businesses and industries to develop more environmentally friendly production processes. Modernizing the grid to better integrate renewable energy sources can help ensure a reliable and resilient energy system, as well as investing in energy storage, which can address the intermittency of some renewable energy sources such as wind and solar. A lot can be also done in our individual households through better insulation, efficient appliances, LED lighting, smart thermostats, curbing inefficiency and energy loss, and so on. The second one is sustainable and smart agriculture. Changing agricultural practices to reduce emissions from livestock and soil can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This can be achieved through the use of practices such as crop rotation, integrated pest management, and conservation tillage, which help to maintain soil health, reduce water usage, and minimize the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and the use of technology to optimize agricultural production. By adopting sustainable and smart practices, farmers can reduce their environmental impact, increase profitability, and contribute to a more sustainable and resilient food system. Transportation is another one. There are several ways how transportation can become more sustainable and reduce GHG emissions, such as promoting and investing in public transportation systems, encouraging the adoption of electric vehicles through financial incentives, charging infrastructure and other supportive policies, promoting walking, cycling, and other non-motorized modes of transportation, encouraging carpooling and ride-sharing through incentives and supportive policies, as well through urban planning, developing compact, mixed-use communities that promote walking and cycling. And the the last one I'm going to talk about is circular economy. Adopting a circular economy model can reduce emissions by reducing waste and extending the lifespan of products through recycling, reuse, and remanufacturing. This can be done through design for long-term use with consideration for end-of-life scenarios such as recycling or reuse, maximizing resource efficiency and extending the life of products through material recovery, repair, repurposing, or refurbishing products, encouraging collaboration between businesses to reduce waste, optimize resource usage, and create closed-loop systems, moving from a product-focused to a service-focused approach to extend product lifetimes, and using digital technology that can enable more efficient resource management, data sharing, and transparency across supply chains. But we all need to do our part. Policy and decision makers need to base their policies and decisions on evidence given to them by scientists and researchers. They can make information on climate risks available, clarify responsibilities and liabilities, support innovation and access to the best technologies, and ensure financing is available to all, especially for solutions that come with high upfront costs. But business and communities need also to support these changes. This is why public-private partnerships where governments, businesses, and communities collaborate can lead to successful measures for both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And this brings us back to ESG. ESG as an external investment framework shows how companies manage risks and opportunities related to environmental, social, and governance criteria. I already elaborated in my speech last year about company sustainability that is being reported through ESG as being profitable. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development stated that its research proves that $12 trillion a year can be unlocked, 12 trillion, if sustainability is achieved only in 4 sectors of food and agriculture, cities and urban mobility, energy and materials, and health and well-being, creating 300 million jobs along the way. And these are all the sectors also relevant for combating impacts of climate change. As I talked last year about the benefit of ESG, how it can be measured and reported, I would like to dedicate the last part of my intervention to inevitability of continuing with ESG. The latest global survey by McKinsey & Company on ESG issues that included replies of more than 1,100 respondents in more than 90 countries shows how their organizations are rising to the challenge. More than 9 in 10 respondents say that ESG subjects are on their organization's agenda. More than 2/3 of respondents say their organizations have achieved broad impact from their ESG efforts in the past 3 years, and 43% report that their organizations have captured financial value from their ESG investments over that span and see their efforts as a means of both protecting and creating value. Therefore, I would like to conclude by saying that measuring company sustainability through ESG is essential, as companies do not earn the continued trust of stakeholders based merely upon prior actions. Indeed, earning social capital is analogous to earning debt or equity capital, and unlike traditional sources of capital, where there are often creative financing alternatives, there are ultimately no alternatives for companies that do not meet the societal bar and no prospect of business as usual or business by workaround under conditions of catastrophic climate change. The only way companies can get ahead of future issues and events is by building purpose into their business models and demonstrating that they benefit multiple stakeholders and the broader public. So we all need to do our part. I thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful speech, Irena Zubcevic. That was very awesome and inspiring. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving forward with the next agenda for today, the 6th session of our panel discussion. In this session, we will have our panelists discuss solutions for climate change. On that note, allow me to welcome our panelists. Karishma Ahmed, Chief Communications Architect, Balipara Foundation, India. Sam Crimson, Head of Sustainability and ESG at Savills APAC, and Dr. Ramesh Ramachandra, Founder and Managing Director of Impact Velocity. This panel will be moderated by Hiran de Silva, co-founder of OneESG and Kaplan Motor. You're all welcome. Thank you. Uh, Sorry, Dr. Ramesh would not be joining us today. Sorry, my bad. Dr. Ramesh should be joining us for the next panel.
Hello, everyone. Rather than while we're waiting for some final adjustments, maybe why don't we just start by introducing ourselves? Okay.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Dr. Ramesh Ramachandra. I'm here representing Impact Velocity. It is an aggregator and a network platform to support the propagation of our 3P commitment in people inner development, planet renewal, and prosperity sharing.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Karishma Ahmed. I am from Assam, India. I represent the organization called Balipara Foundation. Balipara Foundation is an organization taking a community-based approach towards conservation and habitat restoration programs. We are working very closely and passionately with the grassroots communities, the forest fringe communities in the Eastern Himalayan region. And when I say Eastern Himalayan region, it's from Nepal to southwest China southwest. So that's the region we are looking at, and the reason is, of course, the region holds rich biodiversity, species, but also, today if you look at it, there's also threats, ecological degradation, which is leading to diminishing livelihoods and affecting, the lives and livelihoods of people, which is climate change. So Balipara Foundation has been working closely with these community members to equip them with resources, with knowledges, to help them kind of lead and manage their natural assets. So we kind of are the bridges between the grassroots communities and the corporates, the CSRs, to help them convey their stories to the CSR world. So I think, I'll let Sam continue with
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah.
My name is Sam Crispin. I work for Savills, which is a property services company, which means we do property management services for building owners, and we manage transactions for investors and tenants. I'm head of Savills Asia Pacific Sustainability and ESG. It's a blended role, So I manage our internal ESG reporting, which goes from Asia Pacific to our headquarters in London. I also develop sustainability advisory services for building owners and occupiers.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Karishma, and thank you, Dr. Ramesh. How's everyone doing today? Sorry?
Yes.
Yes. Hope everyone enjoyed the event last night, and it was quite difficult waking up today. As you know, I'm Hiran de Silva. I'm the partner for Corpstage in Australia, and we work with. There are two companies that I work with, and the Australian business is OneESG. What we do at OneESG is we unlock ESG for small to medium businesses. And how we do that is we help small to medium businesses integrate ESG, and we help them do assessments, audits, and basically to help raise funding and to raise finance from investors. So we work with international partners from Singapore to Emirates to Sri Lanka, US, and UK. And we've got investors all across. We work with carbon assessments, we do carbon trading, and that's from the ESG standpoint. From an operational standpoint, we have total operation solutions, which is more into back office solutions. So we provide accounting outsourcing, IT outsourcing, and we do digital transformation, we do digital marketing. So there are different companies set up. It's a group of companies all together. So that's OneESG. And last night at the award ceremony, we got an award for Kapla Motors. That was the electric vehicle brand that we have. And that's actually one of my father's company. And so we built that business from scratch in Sri Lanka. We produce golf carts, electric golf carts, street cars, recreational vehicles, and even the tuk-tuks. So even today, while I was coming today, I was having a chat with a tuk-tuk driver to ask, basically a couple of tuk-tuk drivers to ask, okay, what is your take on converting from the petrol to electric? Because what I noticed was in traffic, they are on start, the engines are on start, and that uses fuel, right? But whereas in electric vehicles, what happens is when you're on traffic, when you stop, there's no energy consumption at all, unless for your air conditioning or other lights. Okay, so that was a real enlightenment that I had while I was talking to these tuk-tuk drivers to see, okay, how we can really revolutionize the transport industry. And the traffic is the main cause in countries like Thailand, India, Sri Lanka, a lot of developing nations. So that was one aspect, and that's something which I wanted to build. All right, so coming back to, we'll start off with Karishma, because that's the script I got. Karishma, could you tell us about how can nature economics initiatives be designed to provide economic benefits to grassroots communities while also minimizing the negative environmental impacts?
Sure. When you talk about nature economics, so it's a term called naturenomics, which was coined by our founder back in 2013. And as simple as the word sounds, it's basically nature and economy and how the interdependence and the integration of both. And how do we look into development that's not just about building bridges or building dams, but look into development from a more grassroots perspective, from a more bottom-up perspective. So that's what naturenomics initiatives have been doing. As I mentioned, we really closely, passionately work together with the grassroots communities. The idea is how through the habitat restoration programs, how through forest restoration programs, we can build in their economy, we can look into development in the grassroots area. A small example from one of our project sites I would like to mention here is we kind of, before we begin our forest restoration work, we always build a community nursery. So this community nursery is the nursery for the community's well-being, for the community's development. And this community helps in not just like the well-being of a person's individual life, but also the development of the entire community. This is in Baligaon in Assam, and where the community funds saved has been used to build a bridge where once it was a river and people used to transport from one end to the other using a boat. So with that community nursery fund, today there's a bamboo bridge which is like the access from one end to the other, and people are utilizing it for the daily life. So kind of those developments Naturenomics is looking at, and through our program we really want to define this circle as how do we, through plantation, as we define, like it's not just about plantation, but also how do we look into the biodiversity bit, how do we look into the well-being of ones, and how do we also let the communities enhance their resource management. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Karishma. Dr. Ramesh, could you, Karishma talked about the bottom-up approach. I think that's something closely related to Dr. Nisha's philosophy and Corpstage, where we gather information and we then work on upwards. What's your take with your 3P and your philosophy on that?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question for us, because we are only 9 months old. And when we threw our hat over the wall to say that we are committed to plant renewal, we said, maybe we want to impact 1 million hectares of land. But then we had no idea about what exactly we wanted to do, because the model that we have taken is one of partnership and collaboration. So we are at the stage where we are doing a sensing journey to work with different beneficiaries as well as NGOs to see what really matters for them, so that we can make a difference with the kind of conversation that's important. So in the meantime, what we have done is to influence corporates in this area as well. And so we worked with Corpstage to bring your ESG methodology of training people to look at sustainability from a broader perspective into a tiles manufacturer. And that's been really good, because, although we don't talk about climate change as such, today you've got a national energy crisis in Vietnam. And this manufacturer is the largest Vietnamese owned manufacturing facility. In fact, they are the second largest in all of Vietnam. And about 5 days ago, they announced that they would do a 50-day no production campaign to support the government. And that caused quite a big stir in the marketplace, because, it was scary for the government provincial officials, because they were going like, we can give you electricity if you want, because if you keep telling people that you're not going to do this, the FDI, basket will start to shrink. And people were worried about that. Our competitors were worried that they would have to do the same. So the point is, sometimes, we may talk about the projects in biodiversity or regeneration of forests, but there is also so much more that corporates can do if they paid attention to what's really happening around them. And that's how maybe we may start to influence the landscape. And so we're quite proud that this happened.
Thank you, Doctor. I think the 50 days would be the last 50 days, and it will continue to do so. Sam, as a real estate property management, how is Savills impacting the real estate sector?
Well, we take a fairly wide-ranging approach to what we do in the real estate sector. Property management is part of what we do. And there we try to work with the building owners, the landlords who are our clients. So we provide services to the building on behalf of the owner. And we try to work with not just the building owner, but also all the tenants in the building. So assuming this is an office building, there may be 20 or 30 major tenants, and we try to bring everybody's interests together. So yesterday we heard from one of the speakers about the multi-stakeholder collaboration. That is what we try to do across our property management portfolio. Here in Bangkok, our property management services is more about residential properties. So then it becomes a little bit more complex because you have even more stakeholders to think about. It's people's personal effort rather than working on behalf of a company. So we try to bring all those stakeholders together, and we try to use our position as a service provider to influence the building owner and the occupier, bring them together, collaborate, and try and implement sustainability strategies, which focuses mostly on energy. So if you think about the air conditioning, which may require investment to upgrade. It may require changing light bulbs from fluorescent to LED. I think most people have probably done that by now. But then it goes on into building sustainable approaches into the maintenance program. So checking the gaskets on windows, those are the seals around the glass facade. Over a period of time, those degrade. They may leak 20 to 30% of the cool air from the air conditioning system. They need to be upgraded periodically. So those kind of things. So it's bringing people together, trying to get everybody moving in the same direction, and those kind of things.
Thank you, Sam. Just a follow-up question on that. Now, you mentioned that these changes will need investments, and then with tenants, what incentives will tenants receive and what incentives property managers will receive and what would be the leading driver for these property managers and tenants?
I think that's part of the problem is everybody has maybe perhaps different drivers. So we have to try and bring the drivers together and find an appropriate direction that's acceptable to everybody.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I wouldn't call it the dark art, I call it the green art of what I do is what I try and encourage our teams to do, because I'm not the man on the ground in Jakarta, Taipei, Ho Chi Minh City doing the work. I'm trying to build a coalition of individuals within our business to take those actions.
Absolutely.
And then become the influencers in their local markets.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I think the reason I asked that question is throughout my experience in consulting with the Department of Industries for New South Wales to small to medium businesses, we've had hindrances where the entrepreneurs or the business owners would want to integrate ESG. They found ESG to be an additional cost. They did not see the value. The questions they had to ask was, why are we spending additionally when we are marginally breaking even or we are marginally surviving? And the answer to that was quite to say, as a business, we don't operate in silos. We operate in networks. And to be ESG integrated, that helps to increase your visibility, because if you take a large organization, I've worked for conglomerates, I've done multiple acquisitions and mergers, and one thing that we looked at during those acquisitions and mergers were whether the business is a good investment in terms of financial perspectives, cultural perspectives, systems perspectives, and also how will ESG, how will this business help us to promote our values of ESG? How will these mergers, acquisitions help us to grow as an organization together? And that itself says a lot, because that investment from a big organization, that funding from an organization, even to say the smallest purchase made from those organizations, those really help for small to medium businesses. And that was one of those answers I given to...
Maybe I'll just come back very quickly. We do see in some markets, green certified buildings have a premium on the rent of 5 to 10%. Sometimes it might be more, but that's a fairly typical range. And the building owner also benefits from lower energy costs from their energy savings. So there's potentially an increased margin. So that's the very basic.
Exactly. The curve goes as the initial investment is high, but then in the longevity you benefit. Thank you, Sam. Thanks so much. So, Karishma, could you tell us how forests help in reducing poverty and making opportunities and profit for rural and marginalized communities?
Sure. I think this panel is a good balance of corporate plus the other side is more like, grassroots. We have been working on the model of implementation we look at is we call as the Rural Futures model. And the Rural Futures model has been a model which looks into, it is a initial payment for restoration model. We kind of, people who are engaged with us, communities who are engaged with us are paid for the restoration work. It's basically a nature capital regeneration program. And while they are working with us, we also look into the forms of sustainable businesses we could ensure their livelihoods with, which is also supporting with agroforestry, which is also supporting with their things which they are passionate about. It's about weaving, mushroom cultivation. So people who are engaged with us in the forest land to restore the landscapes, we kind of also support them. For example, if they have a farm in their homestead and they are growing traditional crops of with 3 plants. So through our model, we kind of train them that this tree can be converted into 10 layer cropping, and this crops which it is designed in a food forest manner has economic value in that market. So we do an assessment in a way where we understand also the markets and see that there is economic value in that place. So while it helps them from the economic side, but also helps them to enhance and diversify their agricultural landscape. And in this area, we kind of look into saplings like moringa, which we call it's the drumsticks tree, and it's balanced with ginger, lemon, which acts as the biofence. There's other shrubs, herbs based on, again, customized as per the regions. We check the soil fertility, and for like plants like moringa, how it helps with the nitrogen and balances with the other plants. So that's the model we have been following, and that's the model which has been incentivizing them while they are also engaged with the nurturing of the forest landscape. And we have, in fact, seen an increase of 40% income in their annual income with this model. There has been challenges. It's not always easy to mobilize the communities when they have also their dreams of moving out of their village and to get a good job. But I think with COVID, we have also seen how around in a place called Baligaon, where around 100 youth have come back because of the businesses shut down, and that's when agroforestry was adapted, and they have seen as a sustainable form of businesses. So when we exit from any project site, they have their means of ongoing, whether it's about the community nursery, whether it's their it's a weaving business, or whether it's about their mushroom cultivation unit. So it's helping address the poverty line, and in return also helping with their nutritional value. It's also supporting the climate and contributing towards climate resilience. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Sure.
So I just wanted to add something because, although we haven't started on any project, but one of the things that we were looking at for Impact Velocity was to invest in a startup which had actually come up with a platform with apps for the farmers to actually upload their deeds that they actually own a farm, and then to post pictures of their farming process, then to work with cooperatives who would gather gather them together and maybe give microfinancing loans. And then lastly, also to have on board the uptakers of the actual produce so that they could then adjust their payment scheme. So for impact velocity, we were looking at, okay, how can we empower that whole value chain and maybe, invest in a technology platform which can then be used as a pilot or as the platform for farmers and other community players to come together.
Thank you, Doctor. And I think an interesting question would be, okay, are farmers actually accessing apps on their mobiles?
Yeah.
And yes.
So actually, we've done a couple of pilots in Indonesia, and they are. And in fact, most of this region, people use their smartphones to access stuff on internet and to be really mobile about it. So we find that it's a really easy way to onboard farmers.
Absolutely true, Doctor. I think it's mostly the younger generation that are following the steps of their fathers and forefathers, and that's how the mobiles have actually come to the fields, the farms. It's very true about that. Sam, how does Savills access climate change related risks associated with properties it manages? How does Savills access and manage various aspects of green building, such as energy efficiency in their service to clients? I think we covered a part of it.
I'm much more interested in what in this side of things. The penetration of the apps into the small farmers is fascinating. We're working on a project. It's nothing to do with your question. Sorry. We're working on a project at the moment to help a agribusiness support smallholder farmers in Asia and Africa, and their take on sustainability is purely around social sustainability, and so I'll have a chat with you about that later, please. But come back to your question. Yeah, we do TCFD reporting, which means we have to assess our business exposure to climate-related financial risks, which for us as an operator, service company, we don't think we have huge exposure, although recent fires in North America, bushfires in Australia, floods in other parts of the world, Pakistan last year, we had these awful floods. We may have to reassess that, but generally we think in terms of our operation, we don't have that much risk, but in terms of the properties we manage, again, this comes back to the extension of so this is mostly our scope 3 exposure. The risk is potentially quite large, but that's more on the building owner, the client, than on ourselves as a service provider. So there's a very clear boundary between where the risk sits. Most of those risks are insurable, although even now already in parts of Australia, there are communities which are uninsurable for flood risk in parts of Queensland, for residential communities. So the short answer is to watch what's happening in the insurance markets. Those people are very much on top of where the risk sits, what their potential exposure is, and how they mitigate that exposure. So our mitigation strategy for our business is really to educate our staff, and build a capability in terms of sustainability services, which maybe balances out the opportunity against the risk, and that's what I'm doing. So not as interesting, but it's a different angle. So.
Thank you, Sam. Karishma, I'd like to follow up on that question with you and with Dr. Ramesh as well. So, climate change related risks. How do you assess? I'll start with.
Well, I guess, looking at it from the corporate's perspective, it's like I told you, it's responsible production, consumption, but more importantly, what happens when you have electricity shortage and how do you deal with that? Or there is flooding and how do you deal with that? And I'm not sure whether it's in part it's sort of disconnected because they're not dealing with farmers and livelihood, but there is an impact even for them. So we can be responsible participants in this whole change, and that's what we want to encourage our corporate network to do.
Thanks. So I think climate risks, again, coming from the very social and grassroots angle, like we have seen a lot of instances, for example, for soil erosion and how, those risks have changed livelihoods. I mean, they wake up to not having a house because of such situations. So I think when we talk about building strategies, when we talk about having an approach, I think it's important we be very constructive and mindful, including the grassroots in decision making and building the strategies. While we talk about and building the adaptive measures, I think it's important we really talk and understand from a grassroots level, because I think they are the guardians of and the first-hand servers of our landscape, of our whole biodiversity. So I think having them as also the part of the decision-making process is what will help in the future. And also I think change is happening, but yeah, I think it's going to take time in terms of a lot of implementation, but I think it's in the right direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Karishma. So the final question, I'll just keep it open. What are the outlooks on future to ensure the success of solutions to tackle climate change and reduce carbonization?
Okay, so we believe very strongly that it starts off with people having system awareness about the fact that we are all interrelated and interconnected, and that sometimes the policies, the strategies, the processes that we have as an organization or even as individuals may have an unintended consequence on other parties. And if we have awareness of that, then we can be more responsible. I mean, it was interesting for me to be in that national energy crisis moment when the company decided, in spite of having, 4 factories, 2,500 people, let's do a 50-day shutdown. I noticed that for myself, sometimes I remotely access them through Zoom from my home office in Hanoi. I was not switching on the air conditioning, right? Even though it was hot and humid, just in support of what they were suffering, one and a half kilometers away in some province where there was a huge electricity shortage. And so we can all do our part, and that's the point. And if we all start doing our part about being conscious about unintended consequences, I think it can go a long way.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks. I think it's not just one, but I think we can see multitude of actions that contributes towards the future, and it's not just one solution. And it's, as it says, many small make a great. So I think that's what we need. I think talking about the future and our lives today, how it's been dominated by technology, I think it's something which is so available, and even if in our program sites we see how technology has helped us, or made life easy in terms of monitoring the forest health, in terms of biodiversity assessment, in technologies like satellite imagery. So I think there are tools available. I think how best do we use it for the future? How best do we analyze it, and also build that bridge for our grassroots by including them as well. Like you said, farmers they do have a mobile, and in fact we have seen, probably not apps, but like through GPS, they are trained very well in terms of making sure they could capture the GPS data, the real-time data. So I think there are a lot of initiatives already going. I think how do we best build on our partnerships to implement those is the way forward.
Thank you, Karishma.
My final comments are that property and construction accounts for around 40% of global emissions. In a city like Hong Kong, and presumably won't be that far behind in Bangkok, 90% of electricity use is building related. So if we don't fix real estate, then I'm afraid it's very difficult to see real results across every other industry. So we heard from JWS Steel yesterday about their sustainable steel initiatives. We need that. We need that in cement. We need that in glass production. We need that in aluminium. Every single material that goes into a building has to take those kind of actions. Occupiers of buildings, I'm very confident that the corporate occupiers, small and medium enterprises will also take action. And I think it's more the residential sector that's much harder to influence or control. Because then it's down to the individual. So we see the individual behavior. People know what they should be doing, but actually when it comes down to that decision, air conditioning on, air conditioning off, it's just too easy to flick the switch. But there are solutions around efficiency that can be introduced. So to fill that gap, we must have a little bit more regulation about energy intensity in the residential communities. And it's difficult to change those individual behaviors, but that takes time, and it takes understanding, and a little bit of a push from the government to help it along.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. So I think now it's time for we get questions from the audience, right? But I would like to throw a question to the audience first. We talked about climate change, decarbonization, and then Karishma actually mentioned about technologies. Okay, when we did the evaluation for the awards with multiple companies, they are small, medium, large, and we had multi-billion conglomerates coming to us for assessments. I had an interesting question to ask. I asked them, how are you managing this information? How are you collating this data? And how are you integrating it with your finance team? Being a CFO myself, the first thing I do during the budget and forecast meeting is to shut the door for the sustainability. That was in the past, but we've adapted and we've brought in new thinking. So that was one of the questions I had to ask. I've got fascinating answers. Okay, audience, who do you think has who uses technology? It can be a platform, it can be a system or a database to capture this sustainable data, or do they use manual data or like spreadsheets or handwritten documents? Raise your hands if you say it's technology, systems and databases. Okay, all right. Raise your hand if you say spreadsheets, just manual documents. Just one, okay, two, okay, all right. Surprisingly, it's spreadsheets and manual data. I was shocked, okay. And I asked them, okay, how many team members do you have? This is, I'll give you an example. It was like $4 billion US. And I asked them, how many team members do you have in your sustainability team? And it was like 3 members. And I'm like, okay, how do you collect the data? How do you work with other business units? And how have you captured that data with your finance team? Are you sitting with your business development managers? Are you sitting with your CFO? What sort of budget have you allocated? They did not have a process. So this is where we need a framework. This is where we need to use technology to help us. Corpstage, Dr. Nisha has the solution for that. She has the bottom-up approach for the platform where you can actually integrate this data and build this integration for your organization. And this integration really helps because it creates visibility. Okay. What Sam mentioned was switching on the AC, switching off the AC. How does that really affect? What is my contribution in switching off that AC? How does that affect the organization? How does that affect the climate? If I can actually see that, okay, let's say on a given year, if I switch off the AC X number of times, how much energy do I save? What is the impact I give? Do I make a difference? Yes. And if I can see that difference, would I contribute more? Yes. So I think it's very important for us to use technology in this era especially, and to work together and not have individual specified for sustainability and to say, okay, you're responsible for sustainability, get this part done. I need that whole holistic approach in the organization where everyone feels connected, everyone feels contributing. They will say, hey, I switch off the AC, or hey, I switch off the power plant after this time. So that is something that we need to look at, and I think it was a very interesting discussion that we had. Audience, do we have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. A question for Sam. Discussing with one of your peers in Singapore, the suggestion was that I think 95% of Singapore real estate developers are only looking at sustainability because of the government, because of regulation. Do you feel that there is, or how far away are the asset owners from actually seeing sustainability as a value creation tool, as an opportunity?
Let me first just explain that 100% of real estate developers are motivated purely by financial metrics. So building sustainability into that process is hugely important. So as I mentioned earlier, the green building certification, when the tenants demand green building certification, energy efficiency, etc., because they are on a net zero pathway, they have to start relocating to more energy efficient buildings before 2030. And that process is happening. So that it reflects the rents they're willing to pay, it reflects the choices that are made, and that is pushing the market into the direction of not just green building certification, but continuous improvement. So I work with property developers in Hong Kong. They want to embed sustainability practices that they as a corporate have made commitment to, but asset managers, property management teams on the ground don't necessarily quite understand how that is reflected in their individual actions. So the top-down approach, corporate strategy, implementing that, embedding that throughout the business is what's important in order to deliver that. And that then gives the leading developers the edge in cities like Bangkok and Hong Kong. Office markets are quite oversupplied. To be green gives you a competitive edge. If you're competing for XYZ banking corporation to be a tenant in your building, you need to show that you have the energy efficiency in place that will help them meet their net zero targets by 2030. And that influences the relocation decision. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, I think, yeah, I agree in terms of the financial implications, but it was more that I was surprised that it was regulatory driven, not commercially driven.
And often through the stock exchange listing rules. So Hong Kong, Appendix 27 of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange listing rule sets out ESG requirements, is now mandatory reporting. Singapore is the same. It's moving throughout the region. It's much more common in Europe, but it's coming into Asia. In mainland China, it's part of the planning requirements. You must have a green certification plan in order to get approval to build a new building in China. So it is widely embedded. It may not necessarily be law, but it is coming in through sideways regulations. But Singapore is certainly the most active regulatory environment promoting sustainability, and they have good reason. They learned during the pandemic that they have food insecurity risks, they have energy risks. They're a relatively small city-state, so they are exposed as they were reminded during the pandemic, and they've taken a number of different steps. The 30 by 30 food production policy is just one of those.
Thank you.
I think we have one more question.
Just a follow-up question for Sam. So for example, in the US, an owner-operator like Heinz, for example, so in New York City, we have local law 97, which you're familiar with, which means a mandatory reporting in January of 2024. So this is that, do we see that in Southeast Asia as well? That kind of aggressive policy, those kind of aggressive policies for properties over 20,000 square meters?
I would say yes, it is. It's coming in different ways. So Singapore has the legal regulatory requirement. In Hong Kong, it's a stock exchange listing rule, so that they have to do that. What it doesn't necessarily do is specify in great detail what that reporting should include, but that is evolving. So Hong Kong is currently asking about TCFD reporting. So it's gone out to, as part of their stakeholder engagement, go out to the market, say we're thinking about doing this. Please give us some feedback. So that's in process to identify climate-related risks. What's interesting about the US is it's not happening that much at federal level.
Right.
It comes down to state and city level, right. And that's where the regulations are coming in, and that's an interesting case. And it's the same in Australia. So Australia federal law, Commonwealth law, doesn't really impact this. It's happening at the state level as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think Dr. Nisha has a question.
Thank you very much for your insights. I have a question for Sam and Karishma both. They both come from different type of organization, form of organization, and maybe Dr. Ramesh, you can also participate in this question. So this question is based on sustainable communication, and Karishma is like Chief Communication Architect at Balipara Foundation, and Sam, you are part of ESG reporting. So what's the motivation of the reporting that your organization does? That's the question to you, Sam. And Karishma, how do you see sustainable communication and reporting for your organization? And then I would like to share some of the views later once I hear from you. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. That's a very good question. Yeah, I think it has different forms when I say communication. So as my role, I have been working very closely, actually doing a lot of surveys, sitting together with the grassroots. And when it comes to communications, it's not just about those statistics, but also understanding from the emotional resonance point of view, which actually addresses a lot of climate stories. And when I say climate stories, it is their personal interpretations on the effects they have been facing, the challenges they have been facing. Some has been, the drastic changes from they have seen loss, there has been a lot of life-changing events. So there's a lot of emotional descriptive details which contributes to the whole climate agenda. And as a leading communications architect in our foundation, my role has been to communicate that in the form of art, media, and be that bridge to our donors, CSR corporates, to the government officials we work with. So my role contributes in helping understand, assess, and present that story that climate story to our donors. And when I say climate story, of course, it's personal, descriptive, but I think where the change we need to bring is and I think from the collective action point of view. So while theirs is personal, I think ours is more collective, individual plus collective, which has the power to drive a transformational change. So that's where yeah, my stand come from.
We have a shareholder imperative, so our shareholders expect us to issue ESG reports. It has since become a mandatory legal requirement through the stock exchange, but it started off as a shareholder action. But then what I find having done it is that I look at the business in a slightly different way. I look at it in terms of non-financial metrics, basically carbon emissions. Why do we have so many cars in Australia? Why are we producing so much carbon in Hong Kong? So that leads me into thinking of ESG as quite a valuable management tool in order to look at non-financial aspects of the business. It leads me into questioning people, which they don't always like being questioned about. Why are we driving so many miles in some countries? Why is our scope 3 from staff commuting in Vietnam so much higher per person than in Hong Kong? And of course it comes down to scooters. But then what can we do as a business to help our staff transition from very cheap polluting scooters onto something less polluting, perhaps electric, over a period of time? And how do we build that into a staff retention strategy? So that's where it really becomes quite a fun thing to explore.
Thank you very much. Actually, Dr. Ramesh, would you like to add on this? Or okay. Okay, thank you. Actually, this question came to my mind because, as you mentioned, that Hong Kong has a list like stock exchange requirement for reporting. So when corporates, they do reporting on the basis of the standards, like I know that maybe I'm not sure about now, but maybe TCFD and GRI are prevalent in Hong Kong. And same is with the case with Singapore. TCFD has become mandatory in Singapore, so corporates they do risk assessments and opportunity assessments and climate scenarios, etc. That's a requirement. But the shareholder imperative that you mentioned, that's one thing is a requirement, but shareholder imperative that shareholders want to do ESG reporting, but the main motive is the communication that goes out and the investments. If it is a listed company, institutional investors, they invest. And they also looking for ESG, non-financial impact these days, because they have their own story to tell. So yes, it is a shareholder imperative, but communication, what I wanted to, do this comparison between a non-profit to a profit large company is that communication still stays there. So the importance of communication of the initiatives really bring out the story of corporates, whether it is corporates or NGOs. Last year we have Ahmed here from IFCO Group UAE. We had the Chief Sustainability Officer of the company, Dina Abhinav, last year, and she was asking me, Nisha, do you see in Singapore the packets having stories on that? I said, I would love to do that. If you see food packets in the store, and you can see, instead of the QR code for the supply chain, where you can do the tracking, if you have the stories, I think you will buy that more, because you will know from what exactly people have suffered, or what have they gone through to produce this. So then the premium thing will make sense. So I believe that, whether it's shareholder imperative or whether it's for non-profit, I think sustainable communication, if done in the right way, really helps everybody. And we should not look at it as greenwashing per se, that, why we should. And nowadays what I'm seeing is that corporates are scared of doing that, because they oh, no, we want to stay away from this because maybe we will we'll be caught, and then. But I would still, that's the comparison that I wanted to do with that. Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, because, hello. Yeah, so we designed this panel in such a way, and you would be surprised, and maybe you were thinking that how come an agri, perspective, sitting with the real estate perspective, sitting with the EV perspective on the same panel. The idea of creating this panel was, top 5 priorities for climate change. I was looking at the net zero commitments and what the world has committed for net zero, and real estate sector particularly, and particularly for you, Sam, scope 3, not maybe scope 1, scope 2 directly, but scope 3. They are the second most polluting in terms of cement and building materials, they are the second most, 30% of the emissions come from the real estate sector. And that's one. EV have become a point of debate today because we have lithium batteries, and disposal of lithium batteries is a challenge. We do see is efficiency in the vehicles, but I was actually in the US last month, and I was very fortunate to have Tesla as my Uber, and the driver didn't apply the brake came, and I actually jumped off my seat from the back rear to the front. I was so scared. So automatic EV vehicle, it's very, I don't know, I was scared. So, but then there are challenges with what we are facing with the new technology. And we have, Dr. Ramesh from Impact Velocity, who is basically creating an ecosystem and collaborations. So when we look at the priorities for achieving our goals and tackling the climate crisis, it's not just climate, but the social and climate crisis both. I would like all of the audience have these sheets. I would like you to put down and before that, we started with Irena's, who bring in the policy perspectives, and even Maria bring in the policy perspectives from the government organizations. So yesterday you heard her. I would like you to put in terms of ranking, and then we'll collate the results after the next panel, and we'll share with you that what do you think is the priority? Is collaboration the priority? Is communities, indigenous communities, actually people think, I was at Davos, and the Amazon forest, we have a very young speaker in the world, and she's well known, I'm forgetting her name, but she was really depressed and frustrated with the kind of attention the indigenous communities get. And so, and last year we had a very good example of that from Chhattisgarh, from India, indigenous communities, where 1.3 million women are organized as self-help group women, and they are doing amazing stuff in terms of climate action, in terms of SDG 2, 3, so many SDGs, and they got the award actually for that. So indigenous communities have a very important role to play in terms of climate. Yesterday, Solok City also, you saw that how societies and communities, they work together to create a city like that. And Sam, from the real estate sector, the smart cities, and the overall development and EV vehicles to achieve the climate action. So the audience will do their homework now in terms of priorities, and then we will collate the results. We'll discuss it after the tea break or maybe the next panel. So please, I would request you to do your work, and meanwhile,
just a little bit on that EV thing, Nisha. So lithium-ion batteries, I think we discussed that even yesterday in sustainable finance discussion to say, okay, is it a right investment from investor perspective, because it's a scarce resource, and will that be the future? No, it will not be the future, because lithium-ion is now also dated technology being used by electric vehicles. There are more modern technologies coming in, and there are various developments in that field. So, and with regard to braking, electric vehicles run on electric, and then you have a certain type of algorithms and AI to work on the operational aspect of the vehicle. And then if the braking was a bit harsh, Nisha, that was you said it stopped abruptly, right? The car, it stopped and you, yes. So that is due to the algorithm, how it picks up a certain object in front of the vehicle, whether it needs to avoid it or whether it needs to swerve around it, and then how the braking response comes based on the speed. So it's a lot of technical things coming behind that, and I need to understand more on that scenario. So I wouldn't say an EV is actually, the braking system itself is, the technologies are there for regenerative braking, so you don't actually have to hit the brake to stop the vehicle. The moment you release the accelerator, it slows down because it uses that energy to regenerate your batteries and power up your cells. So there are a lot of things in that, and we can have that discussion after this session. Yes. So is that all? Yes. All right. So thank you everyone, and thank you for being patient. Have a wonderful day. Yeah.
I now request Dr. Nisha to present a token of appreciation to our panelists. Could I please request Dr. Katya Chaban to come up on stage to receive a token of appreciation for sharing important insights yesterday? Now we shall proceed for the tea break.